I was having a day and it didn't start very well.
You don't have to have been chased by a polar bear or had a real cardiac arrest in the morning for your stress hormones to be switched on. Like, I think it's happening on a much more subtle level.
Particularly for clinicians, things that fit into your workday. Everybody's like, well, do some exercise and make sure you're, I don't know, eating all the vegetables and 3 meals. And you're like, it's just nice, lovely. And also, we know that that stuff is not always available to doctors.
Which is our first hack today, our first magic trick, even to reset your parasympathetic.
And I take the opportunity to do this when people are talking to me. Like when, you're sitting there and somebody's giving you the spiel.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Kristeen Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Welcome back, our beautiful friends, our doctor humans, to another episode of the poddy. And today we're going to give you 3 magic tricks to go from surviving to thriving during your clinical day. I am so excited for today's episode. It's going to be so high yield. And this was really inspired by a recent shift that you had, Becc. So tell us what happened during your recent clinical day.
I was having a day and it didn't start very well. I showed up exhausted. That was my starting place, guys. I was exhausted. And, it was one of those times where I'm like, how am I going to get through today? 12-hour shift. And I got through the morning. You just kind of like, you switch on, you get the things done. And I was walking outside at lunchtime, like I diligently make sure I do everybody. I'm looking at you. Do you get outside at lunchtime? Walking outside and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm actually feeling awake. I just kind of got awareness of myself and I was like, oh, I actually feel quite bright and alert right now. I'd forgotten that I even felt tired in the morning. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Then I actually started, as I was getting more and more self-awareness in the moment, to realize I wasn't just feeling better. I didn't suddenly just get, this intrinsic energy back. But actually what had happened is I could tell, I could feel. Now at this point, it's taken me years of self-awareness to get to, but I could tell that actually I had that brightness and that alertness about me because I was adrenalinized, right? Because I had switched into this bit of a fight or flight mode. And it was subtle. It really is subtle. Like I actually, walking down the street, I was just feeling bright. I was feeling alert. But when I tuned into my body, I could tell this wasn't that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, like that intrinsic, natural, steady state energy, but it was an activated, adrenalinized state. And it has kind of been probably like years of accumulating situations where I've been in these sort of, I guess, stressful states and clinical work and self-awareness. And I was able to recognize, even in that very subtle situation where I was just slightly activated, that this was still me being in a fight or flight state. Even though I didn't feel like my heart was pumping, I wasn't sweating, I wasn't panicking, I wasn't having racing thoughts or anything. But I could tell at this point, this energy, this alertness that I've got is adrenalinized. It is my fight or flight system. And that's all good and well, right? We need to use that fight or flight system at times to get things done. But for me, after all these years, I'm also very aware of the consequences of using this state, of working on fumes, especially when I was just hitting my lunch break and I knew I still had so many hours in the day to go and another shift the next day. I didn't want to continue in this fight or flight state because I didn't want to accept the consequences of that state. That was really what was key to me. I didn't want to have to deal with the consequences of staying in fight or flight for this period of time. So in my lunch break, and as I was walking back from my lunch break, I made a decision to do it calm. I made a decision to approach the rest of my clinical day not indulging in or allowing this escalation of this nervous system response, to not run on fumes, but instead to discipline myself to do it calm. And it really is a discipline. Because what this actually looks like is you got to have the self-awareness to recognize you've been activated. You don't get to prevent every nervous system activation, right? Things just switch you on. You have, yeah, Kristeen, you have somebody ask you to do, the fourth task that is also apparently urgent when you were already having the thoughts that you've got, subconscious thoughts that you are just going to get everything done, or you really, really should get to that patient now. Like you're really pushing the time now. And then you have that person come and ask you for that fourth thing. And what's going to happen in that situation is the automatic response will be that your fight or flight system kicks up. But again, it's what you do in that moment. It's what you do in response to that fight or flight activation that determines whether you're going to have an escalation process or whether you create the opportunity for yourself to de-escalate and therefore ultimately switch off that fight or flight. So that was my decision for the afternoon. And I guess that's the first thing that we want to bring to you guys in terms of this story and this episode as a whole is that we want you guys to start to work towards and build the self-awareness of when you are going into that survival mode, because it can be incredibly subtle. And when you can get that self-awareness, that then creates the space for you to make a choice about whether you're going to allow yourself to perpetuate that fight or flight state, or whether you're going to do something on purpose to interrupt it and ultimately to de-escalate the process.
100%. There was just so much in what you said that was fascinating to me. So I guess what you're saying is, like, we can realize that we're adrenalinized, and then we have a conscious choice. Why can't I talk? Everyone, I'm having a dysphasic stroke. Send help. We can choose to live our life a different way in the afternoon, but I think we have to tap into it. But I think what comes up for me is it's not intuitive that just having a clinical day at work would switch on your adrenaline. Like you said, you're so self-aware, and that comes with practice, that you knew that your adrenaline, cortisol, whatever it was, had sparked up, and it was making you feel bright and alert as opposed to tired, which is how you started your day. And you were almost like mystified as to where you got the energy from. And you're like, my adrenal glands are switched on, right? But I also relate to this, like, especially from when I was a registrar, but also what happens now, I'm sure, is like, you can have that and be completely unaware. Like you're going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And I feel like how this shows up for me is like a reactive mode. Like I'm a lot more reactive. I'm not really peaceful, and I'm just kind of literally going from thing to thing. But it's not intuitive to me how we can become so adrenalinized just doing like a ward round or whatever. But when you were talking about how, like, every task is apparently urgent, and maybe there's a lot of tasks and the tasks are building up, and everyone just kind of wants a piece of us. And then maybe there's beeping, and beeping sounds like an alarm, and then maybe someone actually has a cardiac arrest. But what I'm talking about is, like, even just sitting checking my emails, if everything's urgent, and like could switch on this kind of like response, right? So I guess I just wanted to take a wee minute to acknowledge, like, you don't have to have been chased by a polar bear or had a real cardiac arrest in the morning for your stress hormones to be switched on. Like, I think it's happening on a much more subtle level, to a point where you might not even notice it's happening. And I certainly went through my whole registrar years with extremely active adrenal glands and had no idea. I just thought that was a normal way to turn up to work. And then I would make it infinitely worse by not having lunch, which is why I want to put this as the number one hack to get out of your sympathetic response into your parasympathetic. So I used to do that classic thing as a registrar where I would be doing the adrenalized thing, completely blind to it, oblivious, just thought that's what showing up to work felt like. And then I would think, oh God, I've got to like see these other 3 patients before the consultant gets here for their afternoon ward round. Or I'd think, oh, if I don't just push through now, I'm going to leave work late, right? So there was all these like reasons that I wasn't having lunch. But then of course, I wouldn't have lunch. And if I wasn't adrenalinized, then the starvation would be a great way to switch on your sympathetic nervous system. So it's like a biohack that I was quite blinded to until, I became a consultant and had breathing room. But I think if someone had pointed this out to me at the time, I might have made a different choice. So that is why I'm so passionate about it, because I just feel like there will be many of you who are doing what past Kristeen used to do and just completely I guess, engaging with your sympathetic nervous system, just letting that be your normal. And I guess just on that concept of lunch, which is our first hack today, our first magic trick even to reset your parasympathetic nervous system. It's so easy to talk about this with doctors, right? Because as doctors, we know that rest and digest is parasympathetic. Just the act of eating will make you calmer, but you have to let it, right? You're not like what Becc did was she went outside, she went down the road, she had lunch as an isolated thing. You can have lunch and you can inhale it whilst reading an email, and that's not going to activate your parasympathetic.
You can definitely eat in a stressed way. It's one of my least favorite feelings now, eating when I'm in a stress state. It's one of the most unpleasant experiences. I think it's again because I have more self-awareness at the moment, because it just feels so mismatched, doesn't it, to be in a stress state and to be eating. And clinical work is probably one of the few situations, or I guess work in general, where we do that, because we intellectually know we need to eat, otherwise we're going to deteriorate over the rest of the day. It's not going to support us over the rest of the day. And so we force ourselves to eat even though we're in a stress state. Eating, one of the first things I used mindset coaching for was to overcome my emotional eating escapism, really. I used to avoid my emotions and react to my emotions, this whatever discomfort I felt in my body, by eating. It was this desperate attempt to feel better, to feel anything other than what I was feeling in the moment. And this is one of the reasons as well that it was such a frustratingly unsatisfying solution, because I guess eating, we do understand, does make us feel different, but the state in which you eat does affect the food's effect on your body too, doesn't it? You can't just eat from a stress state and have that passively activate your parasympathetic nervous system. As with all these things, guys, we need to be aware of what our mind is doing at the state. You can't ask your brain to believe that you're on fire and you're about to die and then try and, do some yoga and think that that's going to fix the situation.
You got to be intentional about lunch. Get away from the ward. Make sure no one can annoy you. Oh, that's terrible. But you know what I mean? Peck you. There's no room for pecking when we're right. So go hide somewhere in a cupboard if you have to. But if you can, get outside, even take your team and be social and just allow lunch to be lunch, because the work can wait. And the truth is, if you come back in the afternoon, like Becc said, make that choice to come back with a different nervous system, you're going to do way better. So by far, lunch, resetting your parasympathetic, is my absolute favorite technique for this.
You do have time. It doesn't take much time. I think that's one of the thought errors that stops us from taking space to eat lunch. But, eating lunch takes 5 to 10 minutes. Can you really tell us that you don't have 5 to 10 minutes for lunch in your clinical day, especially considering what lunch gives you back? All right. So just watch for those thought errors and create some space.
Bringing this to your conscious awareness is step 1, and then having lunch is step 2. And what would be another way, Becc, in terms of how else do you have any other hacks to turn on your parasympathetic response?
The next one is a bit of a fun one. I've actually just pulled up the study because I wanted to clarify exactly what the mechanism is for this trick in terms of helping you get into parasympathetic. What's this journal? This is Journal of Anxiety Disorders, published 2007. So this trick is about using eye movements to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is really cool. It's one of the foundational mechanisms behind, some of you guys might be aware of, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a type of therapy that is often used for treating PTSD. And the kind of general concept behind it is that we're recognizing that certain things that we do with our body, just like eating is associated with rest with the parasympathetic nervous system, these eye movements can be associated with the parasympathetic nervous system, whether it's just an understanding that your brain associates those two states or whether the eye movements actually cause the activation of the nervous system. I'm not sure, but I've read before one of the mechanisms might be that as you move the eyes, it activates some of the nerves like the abducens nerve that then ultimately activates the vagus nerve. Here in this study, it says that these eye movements during EMDR, which is the specific type of therapy, but the eye movements in general, activate cholinergic and inhibit sympathetic systems. And it even goes on to say the reactivity has similarities with the pattern during REM sleep. So this is just a really cool hack. It's about understanding how your body works. It's about understanding what sets off certain reactions in your body, and something so easy to do, something such a low-hanging fruit in terms of, you can just move your eyes in a certain rhythm, in a certain pattern, in a certain direction. You can do that anywhere. Just even stop. And before you even look at the studies, and we'll put a YouTube video down below for somebody who actually kind of works in this area and who's more familiar with the mechanisms behind it. It's not really my area of expertise. But all that aside, with all of these things, and this is what we always do in coaching, we're asking not necessarily for the research and what works for the average person. We want to know, but does this work for you? Does this have an effect on you? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it today, because this is something that has had an effect on me. Just slowly now, just relax yourself and slowly move your eyes. Let's even just try horizontal from one direction, from the center off to one extreme of your vision on the horizontal plane. Just hold your eyes there. And now slowly go to the other direction and just notice, does it change the way you feel?
My eyeballs feel funny. I'm thinking, is it just me? I've never actually sat and thought about this before to this moment. But when you move your eyeballs from side to side, do they do it in like a little stepwise? It's not smooth. Is there something wrong with my cerebellum? It goes doop, 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 doop. Is that normal?
Yeah, mine's not particularly, doesn't feel smooth either.
All right, just making sure I'm normal. Because I was having a dysphasic.
Where's my code stroke? I did call one earlier.
I shouldn't say that. It's not funny. That's not funny. Anyway, but this is okay. But yeah, anyway, but it does, I think, and you don't really have time to think about anything else as well when you're doing that. It's probably like a mindfulness as well as
exactly.
Vagal. It's got like two functions.
Yeah, it is hard to isolate the effect of these things, isn't it? But yeah, we'll put some links down below, just because it's not necessarily an expertise area of either of ours, but we just want to give you some options to consider, some things to try for yourself, and particularly for clinicians, things that fit into your workday. Everybody's like, well, do some exercise and make sure you're, I don't know, eating all the vegetables and 3 meals, and you're like, it's just nice, lovely. And also we know that stuff is not always available to doctors. So sometimes we have to make these things just more accessible and more efficient to fit in with our priorities. Speaking of, our third one, highly accessible. Tell us about it, Kristeen.
The third one is an actual magic trick that I really do use on the regular, and it's because it's so quick and easy. And it sounds a little bit cliche because it involves breathing, but just bear with me because it's actually about changing your respiratory rate down to like 5 or 6. So all this, you can even try this with me. All it involves is taking a really big slow breath in for 4, and then hold for 4, and then out for 4. And you can even hold out there if you want to. And the idea is that if you do that, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, even pause for 4 there, you're going to find that by the time you've done that a few times, you have actually just reduced your respiratory rate to 5 or 6 breaths per minute, right? So that is the complete opposite of a stress response, right? And also what you're doing by taking the big slow breaths is you're activating your diaphragm, which is your vagal nerve, right? It is your parasympathetic. Just the fact that you're taking big, deep, slow breaths tells the body, just like you said, the body's telling the brain, everything's cool, everything's fine here. And I find this is really good for centering myself before public speaking, or even before like a family meeting at work, just getting me into, or, like when you're moving from, like what you say, from the adrenalized state that you're in, and you might want to do like a really sensitive family meeting or something, and you've got this kind of agitation going on, and it's not because of the family meeting, you're not even worried about that, but you just want to come across as like a peaceful, calm being when you're in this more emotional place. I think it's really great for transitioning yourself into who you need to be for those situations as well. So whether it's to calm you down or just to create like a really calm energy for the people around you, like as well, it's quite masterful actually. Like if you do this, and it just takes no time at all. The other place that I love to use this when I'm doing education sessions is if I run an education session really close to the exam, or to be honest, even any time throughout the exam period, because what I used to find when I was a trainee was I'd run to these tutorials, right? I'd be doing my shift, I would be adrenalinized, probably haven't had lunch, probably had cake instead, not a good move. And then I would be in these sessions and someone would be talking at me and I can't take it in. Like I don't know whether it is a fight or flight thing, or I'm thinking about all the things I'm yet to do, all the things that happened. I cannot be present in the room. And therefore I'm sitting there and I've made it to the tutorial, but I'm just like a deer in the headlights. And me being there is completely pointless because I'm not actually learning anything. And I think, people listening might be able to relate to that. And so I think this is another technique that just helps you to like come into the room and be there so that you can actually focus on what's happening. And so I think, yeah, there's countless places you can use this, but I think it's very potent. Like it's so potent. It is a magic trick because no one really talks about it, and it's great. Have you used this before, Beck?
Totally. And look, even just doing it with you just then, I didn't want to stop after you had me start. So guys, if you're listening, while I'm talking right now, do that 4-4-4. Start the breathing, do it now, enjoy it. I find the first couple of breaths quite uncomfortable. It's almost like I'm breaking open, I kind of picture like this fibrous kind of tissue on my torso, breaking it open. It's kind of tight at first as I open my chest. But then by like even the second, maybe the third breath, it's feeling like it's a lot more comfortable. And I take the opportunity to do this when people are talking to me. Like when, you're sitting there and somebody's giving you the spiel, they're giving you the patient case or whatever, and you know that you've got like a couple of time to just listen. All you can do is listen. And it's like you're saying, it's often what happens is, you're not just stepping into the situation with a blank slate and then receiving this information from somebody else. You're usually task switching from something else as somebody's now pouring this new information and usually problem onto you. It's such a great way to, as you say, just like in that tutorial setting, get your mind in a state of receiving the information and thinking better. We know that when we're in parasympathetic, well, it depends what kind of thinking that you want. But our sympathetic state makes it harder for us to think in novel prefrontal cortex type ways. The stress state shunts the blood flow and more of the cognitive processing power down into the basal ganglia, which are the systems more responsible for repetitive patterns, responding and behaving in the way that we have in the past, as opposed to creating new novel responses and high level thinking and things like that. So being in that parasympathetic state definitely is advantageous for that tutorial setting and for this setting where I'm sitting here and trying to receive this complex information or important information for whoever's talking to me. So I literally use this opportunity in the day when I'm like, I just have to be still. I have to give this person my attention. I shouldn't say have to, but when you're busy and you're like, you want to get things done and then you're like, this person needs my attention. So I take that time when I feel like physically quite idle to do the deep breathing then. You don't need to carve out time during your day to do these exercises. Look, I don't know how well it would be received if you started doing the eye movements while somebody spoke to you. Maybe that one's for a bit of private time. But the breathing is something you don't need to carve out time for. You just slip it into different modes. Another time is when I'm driving or when I'm transiting. That's another beautiful time to just bring in a bit of that breath work. It doesn't need to take time. So I just, as you said, it's cliche and we're probably all kind of sick of hearing it, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's powerful and it's so accessible and easy. And for me, my biggest challenge is just reminding myself to do it. Creating those little opportunities to do it that don't cost me much, that really fit into the day. So I love that breathing example. So I hope we've really inspired you as to how you can give yourself these unfair advantages to get into that calm state. I think there'll probably be some eye rolls from my story where I'm like, I just decided to do it calm. I just decided to not be stressed in the afternoon. But that ability and that being available to me is a result of years and years and years of work. And I am by no means perfect. in that situation. But that does become available when you do this work over time. This work necessarily makes you more self-aware and more tuned into your body, and therefore what it needs and what will actually work in the situation. But these 3 tricks that we've given you, so once again, they're lunge, the eye movements, and the deep, slow breathing in particular. These things are all associated with your parasympathetic nervous system state. Whether they actually trigger the parasympathetic state or not, I don't know. But as Kristeen said, just that association can be so powerful for your mind. You're telling your mind, you're showing your mind, you're giving your mind the signals that you are safe and you can be calm and you can slow down and you can be in parasympathetic. So these little tricks just give you that extra advantage. So let's be honest, we all want to have in our day. If you could have a no cost, super fast, even like comfort inducing, pleasant, quick thing you could do in your day to get you out of that stress state and into your parasympathetic state, would you do it? Would you like it? Because we've just given you 3.
Absolutely. And you won't recognize yourself. And I think, yeah, what you were saying there, Beck, about, you chose to start your afternoon in your parasympathetic, basically. You made a conscious choice to do it differently and calmer in the afternoon. And I guess that is going to be true for everyone. We all have that choice. Obviously, you're really good at it and really good at tuning into yourself. But I guess hopefully after this episode, everyone does feel like they have that choice. And it's just like working on that self-awareness and knowing what your modes are. But equally, like, it's not even like setting the expectation that you're going to be like some Zen person in the afternoon, but you're kind of almost resetting yourself. Because the truth is that if you start adrenalinized and you haven't had lunch and you're already starting with a very highly aroused state in your sympathetic nervous system, the place to go from there, like my experience of that, is actually get jammed up. Like there comes to places where my brain ceases to function properly when I need it. Like it's not actually that helpful. I don't perform better in that state. Like it's very time limited in terms of its utility for me. And I end up just becoming agitated and ineffective, like, and tired actually. And then I need a coffee, and then the coffee doesn't help, and it makes me more agitated. It's like, so I guess people listening might relate to that. Resetting your nervous system just allows you to hit the reboot button. You might find that in the afternoon you do get a little bit adrenalinized again. But the point is not to become dysfunctional, which is where I go if I adrenalinize too much.
We see this natural energy management occur in animals. People talk about this when they talk about how we need to complete the stress cycle. You might have heard that term before. And in animals, they see animals as completing the stress cycle by shaking it off, right? Physically discharging that energy. They're allowing that energy to move through their body and to move out ultimately of their body. And we want to recognize when we as humans need that shake it off kind of completion of the energy of the stress cycle or the energy or the emotion ourselves. And up until the point that we shake it off, up until the point that we complete the cycle, we allow the cycle to continue in our body. We trap the energy. We keep the energy in our body. You can think about how we sort of naturally do this in our lives. You have a near miss, or say you get off the giant drop in a theme park or something like that, and you kind of had this intuitive urge to go, woo, like, wow. And it's that kind of, it's one of the ways we discharge energy. You see it when people are bubbling up with anger and they will shout. Shouting is a way to discharge, release some of that energy. You're letting that energy move through your body, and you feel that sense of shouting as a bit of relief. This can be a form of shaking it off. I'm not advocating for shouting. In many of our social settings, in most of our social settings, shouting is not socially productive. But I just want to offer you that the reason that we feel compelled to shout is often as a result of wanting to complete that stress cycle, to allow that energy to move the way it wants to and run its course.
So we hoped you loved those 3 magic tricks. We hope you put them into practice, and definitely, I can't talk today. Definitely let us know how how you go in the comments below, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
darkest roads and up in the clouds. But I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there.